The trad wife versus modern wife Q&A. Oh my goodness, is the mailbag ever full? Let's continue on from last week's conversation about trad wife, boss babe, and the ups and downs of both, and ultimately respecting every woman's choice to do what's best for her, her mate, and her children and family. Now, my mailbox and comments were busy with many of you sharing your thoughts, your opinions, and asking questions. So thank you so much. I'm Jackie Elmer. Grab the Pilot Wife checklist at pilotwifepodcast.com and drop any questions that you might have for the show right there. Now, I'm going to go through these in no particular order. And keep in mind, this podcast is available on YouTube via video, and it's also available on all of your podcast apps. So wherever you're watching it, listening, etc., occasionally I'll reference something that is visual. Just know that I always link the YouTube channel in the show notes. All right, so again, as I mentioned, these are in no particular order. One of the questions that I asked was that I had mentioned premarital counseling, that my husband and I did that. And the biggest question was around suggestions, like where do you get that? Who do you get that from? Do you hire a therapist? What if you don't go to church? Now, ours was actually through our church. Interestingly, my husband and I were both born and raised Episcopalians, and so we opted to get married in that church. And so it was very easy and natural for us to go through premarital counseling through the church. But if you're not church affiliated, a couple of things, there are a lot of opportunities to even use the services of some different churches and different religious organizations. So if you lean that way, I just highly recommend you ask around for starters and interview some people and just find out what they do, what they provide, etc. Beyond that, certainly you can hire a therapist. There's betterhelp.com, which you've probably heard of. I don't have a referral code or anything for that, but you can just go to betterhelp.com and learn a little bit more. I have my experience with that from talking to a number of different people is sometimes it takes a while to find the right person. But the reality of it is, if you're hiring a therapist, a counselor, a psychologist, often it takes a little bit of time before you find the person that's the right fit for you. But I would just go into it being very upfront that you're looking specifically for premarital counseling and that you have some specific topics in mind that you want to cover. And then beyond that, there are lots of coaches that provide couples counseling. I shouldn't say counseling, scratch that, that provide couples coaching. And I actually am one of them. If you just go to pilotwifepodcast.com, you can find a link there to click on to set up a call with me. And I'd be happy to go through a lot of that with you, just a complimentary, let's get to know each other kind of call. So you can start there for sure. And again, ask other people. Referrals are an amazing way to go. Hey, did you seek premarital counseling before you got married? Anything like that? Any recommendations? Do you have someone? And then the second question that came in were around values. I think I had mentioned that, but it came up in topic with a couple of different people who I was having an email exchange with after the show. And that's a big part of the whole communication, premarital counseling, all of that is to really get clear on your values, because ultimately it's our values that shape our lives, that guide our morals, guide our principles, guide our decisions. So many different things like that guide the way that we want to manage our life. That doesn't mean that it doesn't change. Certainly it does and it can, but it's really important that you know and identify your core values. What matters most to you? What are you seeking most in your personal life, your partnership, married, romantic life, family life with children, career, all those different things. Go through a very specific process of identifying what your values are in each of those areas. Make sure you know yours, and then certainly invite your partner to identify his or her values and then get together and share those with each other. That's an important part of it. I had a conversation with my adult son not that long ago, who recently went through a divorce. He has a almost 6-year-old, my little granddaughter, and we were talking about that kind of for next time, like getting him prepared. And I asked him, have you ever really sat down and identified what your values are? And he said, no, Mom, honestly, I never really have. And I said, well, I recommend that you do that because he was asking me, like, how did you and dad work it out? And how did you guys figure out this? And I said, well, that was a big part of it. We spent time before we walked down the aisle really getting to know ourselves and that part of it. Now, that doesn't mean things don't change. And I'm going to get to that a little bit later in the episode, so stick with me. But make sure right now, today, you have those identified for yourself and written down. Share those with your partner, and then probably a good idea would be to begin to identify some mutual values that you have, some very different ones that you might have, and have some clear communication around how you're going to navigate those things if and when they come up in the married life and you have to make decisions around that. And then I think it's a great idea, and certainly I'm not going to pretend I did this. If I had it to do over again, I would have. And I didn't, but looking back, I think it would have been a great idea to, kind of chart the course of your ups and downs, takeoffs and landings, destinations, where you're headed, to do this on an annual basis. Check in with each other, have a date night, sit down and say, hey, what are your goals for the year? How are your values looking? What's most important to you this year? What's most important to us as a family, as a couple, different things like that. And if you start that from the beginning, it makes it so, so simple. And I promise you that will ward off a lot of problems that you might have in the future when things do begin to change. All right, the next thing that came up, what about a prenuptial agreement? Now, it's kind of funny. I have no experience with this. It would have never crossed my mind getting married. Neither one of us had a whole lot of assets that we brought into the marriage. But I do know, especially with later marriages, as I had shared on last week's show, that, I've run into situations with people who married later in life, second and third marriages. They had assets, they had adult children, and there was a lot of that to work out. So I think there tends to be a knee-jerk reaction when you hear the term prenuptial agreement, and there can be a tendency to think, well, gosh, you're kind of giving yourself leeway to automatically say, when we decide to get divorced, this is what's going to happen. But I believe in the preparation, and having things planned ahead of time can be a great way to avoid those kind of things in the end. So I think it's one of those things, if you sit down together with a kind-hearted conversation around it and say, look, this is not at all what I'm intending. This is not at all what I'm hoping happens. But what are your thoughts on this? And again, it kind of depends on the assets you bring in, what your career path is, what their career path is. I did a podcast show a couple of years ago with the divorce lawyers who specialize in aviation, and they were amazing. It's a great show, and I will link it in the show notes so that you can go and find that and listen to what it is that they have to say about that. Who needs it? When do you need it? And why in today's day and age it's not bad regardless, and kind of how to introduce all of that. All right, the next question that came in, and again, these are in no particular order, but this one would be right up at the top because it got a lot of conversation, and that is, how does one go about dividing up household duties and kid duties? And I'm going to make this two parts because I feel like they're completely separate and different, even though they can segue together and work together beautifully if you set it up that way. So the first one we're going to talk about is household. Well, here's the thing. The modern media today, whether it's headline news or social media, influencers, whatever, they tend to glorify what I like to call hustle culture, and entrepreneurship, and having it all, making it sound like it's just so easy to have it all. And movies and TV shows typically depict, or I should say frequently depict, homemakers as outdated and unfulfilled or lacking ambition. And it tends to reinforce stereotypes that really diminish the value of domestic roles, and or diminish the role of, a working woman, different things like that. The reality of it is, like anything, you have to decide for you. But the bottom line is, in a home, when you're living in a home, whether solo, sharing a home with a family, or any of that, there are things that absolutely must be done. If you can afford to hire a house cleaner, I highly recommend it. It will bring you peace of mind. It will clean your home in a way typically you won't do unless you're one of those very fastidious type house cleaners. I'll be the first to say I was not. In fact, when I first launched my first business, that was my first goal. I had two primary goals. One was to make enough to hire a house cleaner, and the second was to buy organic food. And I accomplished both of those pretty early on. But if you can get a house cleaner, that's great. Great. If you can have it once a week, great. Every other week, great. And once a month, that's better than nothing. But at the end of the day, if you will begin to break your calendar into daily jobs, it's kind of funny. I talk about this a lot in my business coaching, but if you want to climb Mount Everest, you don't decide on day one you're going to climb Mount Everest and start off, right? You're starting at base camp and then you're slowly working your way up. And it's kind of the same with keeping a house clean. If you will break it up into chunks and figure out what's going to be done today and what's going to be done tomorrow, at the end of the week, you'll have a clean house or you'll have a clean enough house that it's rotating regularly and you can all live with that. So if you begin to set up daily jobs that involve your children, if you have children, that's a great way to get things accomplished and to not constantly feel like you have to block 4 to 6 hours to clean the entire house if you just do little things here and there. Way back in the day, I'm really dating myself. This was easily 3 decades ago, maybe more. There was the Fly Lady. And I think it was flylady.com. And honestly, she's still out there. So if you just Google Fly Lady house cleaning or just even Fly Lady, you'll come up with it. But I think it is flylady.com. Anyway, I've set for her email series probably a dozen times. And it's overwhelming in the beginning because you probably get 3 or 4 emails a day. And it's like, do this in the morning and then midday and make sure you clean your sink before you go to bed and all this stuff. And I was overwhelmed and I was not able to keep up with it at the time. But the thing that I found that with Chat GPT, it was easy for me to go in and say, this is the size of my house. These are the rooms. This is kind of the makeup of our family now, dogs, all of that. Help me build a calendar around keeping the basics up between the biweekly house cleaning that my housekeeper does. So that's a great way to do it. And then I do think it's important to get your kids involved. And there's a couple of key reasons for this. You know, we all have to pull our own weight, at least in my opinion. And kids can get started doing that at a really young age. And if you make it fun, you don't make it sound like it's a chore, you don't put a big grimace on your face when you go out to, start working on cleaning up the house and stuff. If you make it fun, it'll be fun for them. It'll be almost be like a game, and you'll be teaching them some critical life skills early on how to live in a clean, healthy way, how to keep things up, and how to be part of a community, your family community of working together to do things that are important that benefit the entire household. So age appropriate, of course. From an early age, you can teach kids how to sort laundry. Now, I'm one of those kind of, obsessive compulsive laundry people that I sort mine. I have blacks, I have whites, I have blacks that are and darks. So like navy and black go together, the whites go together. And then I have, more colorful colors. If I have a lot of red or pink, because I tend to wear a lot of red and pink, I have those together. And then jeans go in a pile. I can be a little off the chart about that. So it depends on you. But again, it's super easy to teach kids how to sort laundry by color coding it. And even if you don't want to wash it that way, it's a great way to get them started knowing how to make different piles. And quite often you'll find that it turns out that they're sorted in the right size of piles. And then you can talk to them about how, okay, we're going to mix these together. These colors go together. I never wash jeans with whites because I end up with my white clothes, a dingy gray, because denim has a tendency to constantly be bleeding into, or, the dye comes out, etc. So it's a great time and it's a great opportunity to get them involved doing that. Kids can do a great job gathering towels. So depending on how frequently you wash your bathing and showering towels, kitchen towels, all of that, you can put one kid on the task of go around the house, gather all the towels. Here's the linen closet, then go around the house and resupply the towels. You'll have to work with them a couple of times possibly to show them which towels you use in which bathroom or whatever. But again, it doesn't take that long until they get that mastered and they can be part of the process. Teach them to fold laundry, teach them to hang laundry, especially their own. And then from that, you can teach them how to organize a closet. I mean, there's so many things that you can do with that that are great life skills. Teach them to unload the dishwasher. I know, again, I'm kind of the type A, a little obsessive compulsive about the way my dishwasher is loaded before it cleans. But as long as things go where they belong pretty much in the right order, I always love somebody to unload the dishwasher, and kids are great for that. And then toys. I mentioned last week that one of the things that I did that was for me as much as anything. I did it at the end of the night, and certainly before my husband got home on a trip, but I would have the kids just gather up all their toys. They didn't have to be super organized. I wasn't concerned about that. Had a couple of tubs or a toy box or whatever. Just get them all in there and get them off the floor. I don't want to be walking over them, kicking them, tripping over them, or doing any of that. Then, as they get a little older and they go off to school, you can have maybe on Fridays is unload the backpack day and wash out lunch boxes if you send them with lunch. You can get them involved in that so that you're making sure that once a week the backpack is completely cleaned out. There's no banana peels left in it or icky food that's rotting in there. Any important papers that you need to see as the parent, those can come out. And then you can kind of do the same thing either on Monday morning or possibly Sunday night. Teach them to load back up their backpack with what needs to go in it. And same with lunch boxes. Friday evening, Friday afternoon after school, or Saturday or sometime over the weekend is a great time to clean out lunch boxes, get those fresh and sanitized and ready for the week. And again, if you just make this fun, you make it family oriented, and you get the TV as much as possible out of the way. I really like to stress that because it's easy to get them folding laundry and watching TV too. But I think kids spend too much time in front of screens, whether it be the TV screen, an iPod, an iPad. iPod, did I say iPod? Are those still around? Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. The more that you can make this about family time, communication, having conversation, how's that going? Do you have any questions on this or whatever? The more opportunity you have to engage with them and again, build a really strong relationship and rapport. Okay, now let's go into how do you divide up kid duty. And I have to say this loud and clear. First and foremost, this always is like nails on a chalkboard to me when somebody will say, I don't want to ask my husband to babysit or whatever. I'm like, listen, people, parents don't babysit their own children. Parents do not babysit their own children. They care for their children. It's part of their responsibility. A babysitter is someone that you hire, or perhaps a family member, the grandparents, whatever. Those are the people who babysit your children, watch your children, whether it be paid or free or whatever. But parents don't babysit. So don't be afraid to divide that up. Obviously, if you are the one at home on the ground, you're probably going to get hit with a little bit more of the parenting duty. But over time, things do wash out. I think it's important that you still begin to grab your own time whenever you can, just to go have coffee by yourself or to go. I love The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, and she talks about taking artist dates. I love to go thrifting. I love to go to thrift stores, antique stores, consignment stores. Half the time I don't even buy anything. I just like to look around. I love to go to design centers. I love to go to home furnishing stores. And a lot of times I'm just kind of dreaming about if I were to redo my house, not that I'm necessarily going to, but how would I do it? It's just for me, that's a form of art and things that I love. Now, in the beginning with babies and infants and toddlers, that type of care is monotonous and it's ongoing. Like you almost feel like you never get off the clock. And honestly, you don't. There's the feeding, the cleanup, the baths, the bedtime, the changing the diapers, the washing all the laundry, all of that. And, there's that couple of years in there with a newborn to toddler where you feel like you're doing a lot of that. And as I said last week, I was not a great tiddlywinks mom, but once they got to the age to play games and stuff, I really loved that and thrived on it. Not that I didn't love them as babies, it just wasn't my favorite time in terms of the care and just the day-to-day routine of that. But once they get to preschool and elementary, things do get a little bit easier. You begin to find a little bit more time for yourself. If you're doing like what I mentioned and you're divvying up the homemaking or household chores and duties and stuff and getting them involved, that takes a lot of time off of your plate once you get it going and done right. And so that frees you up and have a little bit more time too. But again, when you have a partner who's gone, a third to a half of the month, things are going to fall on you, whether it's sports and activities for kids as they get older, being the taxi service, if you will, managing sleepovers and managing PTA and maybe volunteering at the school. But I will tell you that as a pilot, and let me just say specifically as a commercial airline pilot, my husband had lots of time and lots of opportunity to volunteer in the classroom, and he did. He was a great volunteer in the classroom. He also would take the kids individually to lunch once a week, every other week, like on Fridays, he'd pick one of them up and take them to lunch, from the school. And they loved that. And it was a special time and it was their special getaway. And it got him active and involved and got them, loving that part of the job and everything else too, especially if you have children who are having a challenge with them flying or leaving on a trip or whatever, when they can get those little special opportunities with just dad or just mom or whatever it is, that can be amazing. So figure out a way to begin to incorporate those in. And in the beginning, some of that is awkward. It's like working it out, but it's like anything. Once you try it a few times and you get it going, it works great. But whatever you do, I really want to implore upon you this. Don't let your children ever see you haggling over them, the responsibility of them, the care of them, who's transporting them, who's feeding them, who's responsible for what. You don't want them to overhear those conversations and start to develop a guilt complex or something negative that's going to get, ingrained in their brain where they think they're an inconvenience or they're a hassle or anything like that. I think all of us at some time said maybe we could have gone on the Oprah show and talked about challenging things in our childhood. And all of us are doing the best that we can. But I just want to encourage you to, again, do the best you can, not to allow your children to see you in any way arguing over or even just squabbling over things that have to do with them. Okay, and then along with that come family meals. And this is one of the things that I am aware of being bannered about all the time. Like, how do you eat healthy in today's environment? You're on the go, two parents are working, kids have these activities, all of that. And here's the thing, I still feel like family meals are so important for a number of reasons, not the least of which is the quality time you spend together, which I'm going to get into that. Also, the way you set your children up for better health and good nutrition and lower disease rates when you are doing family cooking and when you are bringing in whole, hearty, nutritious foods into their plan. So, this is going to be a way for you to truly set your kids up for great health, lower disease rates, and better functioning at school when they've fed their body well, which feeds their brain. And it's going to, again, set them up to really function so much better at school. So the first thing is turn off all the devices, turn off the TV, and make family time a fun event. It's an entire process. This is the way you make it happen when you're busy on the go. Anyone can do this. Make sure you have an Instapot and make sure you have a crock pot. Make sure you have the kitchen utensils that you need, including storage, including the little bento boxes, if that works for you to make lunches. Like, really go through and figure out what you're going to be cooking for and how you can best prep your kitchen with all the tools and resources that you need along with the food and the planning. So you get all that done. And I'm probably going to do an entire show on that, honestly. So stay tuned. But first thing you want to do is meal plan. Sit down as a family. What do you like? What do you not like? Just let them talk, pizza, chicken nuggets, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to encourage you to get away from prepackaged foods, even sitting down together as a family. But I realize it's a process. So I'm not going to tell you to get rid of all that stuff right away, but you can begin to factor a lot of these out, especially as I'll be sharing recipes. And if you go to my YouTube channel, Lower Toxic Life, that particular YouTube channel, I've got a lot of meal planning. I've got a lot of cooking tutorials. A lot of stuff is over there. And I will link that in the show notes. And you can see it on the screen if you're watching on video. But I have a lot there and a lot of different assets that you can find over at peakperformancehabits.com. The website has recipes and a lot of different things like that as well. So the first thing is to meal plan. You sit down together, you get a list of what everybody likes, you get a list of what everybody doesn't like, and then you begin to plan out meals. Now, maybe in the beginning, if you're just starting this, you're going to plan to eat together you're going to plan home cooking 4 nights a week and still have the latitude to eat out 3 nights or leftovers or whatever. But get started with something. Maybe it's just 2 nights a week to start with, but something is better than nothing. And it gives you the opportunity to build on all of that as you go along. So you're going to make a meal plan, depending on how many kids you have, how many are in the family. Each person perhaps gets the opportunity to decide what it is they want to have. And then together you make a grocery list. What do you need? You teach them where things are stored in the cabinets, in the refrigerator. And oh, do we need pasta? Oh no, we have pasta. Do we need spaghetti sauce? Yep, we're out of spaghetti sauce. Let's add that to the list. Different things like that. And then you go to the grocery store together and help them learn how to read labels. Oh, we want a healthy spaghetti sauce that, the number one ingredient is water followed by sugar or something like that. So you begin to educate yourself first on reading labels. And again, if you go to Lower Toxic Life, the YouTube channel, or peakperformancehabits.com, the website, I've got all of that on there in terms of how to read labels. I've got free cheat sheets. All of that is on there that you can access. Okay, so grocery shop, learn how to read labels, teach them how to read labels, teach them why it's important. Ask them if they can pronounce that word. If you can't pronounce the word, you ask yourself on a label, would I really want to eat this? Would I put this in my mouth as a single ingredient? So those are great ways to educate them without preaching to them. Just ask them questions. What do you think about this? What do you think about all these ingredients? Does that sound very tasty to you? Does it sound nutritious? There's a lot of things that you can do to make it a fun time. And then after that, when you get home, you have them help you put the groceries away, maybe even start some organizational stuff in your cabinets and your refrigerator for when we're cooking which meals, put stuff together so it's simple for them to help pull it out, all of that. And then you're actually going to meal prep, have kids help you with slicing and dicing vegetables, setting aside pasta, for instance, if you're going to make that. What do we need for this? What do we need for that? What condiments? Maybe you're making hamburgers one night. And so what are the condiments that you need with that? There's so many ways that you can get them involved and engaged. And when kids get involved in the kitchen and cooking and picking out vegetables and, maybe choosing one. I did a video once over on the other channel about how to, get them picking out like cabbage, for instance. I think I mentioned purple cabbage or red cabbage, whatever you call it. And, oh, it's pretty. Let's get this, let's figure out a way to put this in our food. So an idea for red cabbage, I mean, have them slice it or you slice it and taste it. Oh, it's crunchy. What does it taste like? What does it feel like? What's the texture? Things like that. And then you can teach them how to chop that up really fine and put it in your spaghetti sauce, your pasta sauce, or you can put it in a chopped salad or something along those lines. But again, it gets them exploring new foods, new vegetables, and it's a great way to ultimately get them to eat those foods that they might otherwise resist. But it's so funny, when they choose it, they quite often want to consume it too. They want to be all in. They want to have the all in buy-in on all of that. And then you meal prep and then you cook together and then you clean up together and then you teach them how to store leftovers. And then perhaps you have a leftover night. Maybe that's one of your things. Each week you take whatever's left over from the 2 meals, the 4 meals, however many meals you're working on together. You teach them how, okay, on this night we're going to have leftovers and how are we going to divvy this up and who's going to get the one taco we have left or the one hamburger patty or whatever it is. You can, figure out how that's best going to work for you. You can teach them budgeting through this. This is our grocery budget. This is what's on our list. How are we going to go to the grocery store and figure all this out? And then a great thing to do is show them the difference. I'm just going to take a family of 4 because that's what mine is. Show them the difference between home cooking 4 hamburgers/cheeseburgers with a salad and avocado mousse pudding, as I like to say, because it's a healthy chocolate mousse pudding alternative. That recipe is on my website. How to make that at home versus the same things for 4 people at McDonald's. They wouldn't have avocado mousse, but they might have a shake or ice cream or cherry pies or something like that. And then also, so what it costs to get it at McDonald's, what it costs to cook it at home, what it costs to order it through DoorDash, and anywhere else where you may typically spend your time. This is not only going to teach you a lot about where money is going, but it's going to teach your children a lot about the cost of food and how to eat better at home and save money if that's something that's important to you. And the big thing too is just share the data with them. You don't have to preach at them and say, this is why you never want to do this. You can say, which would you rather spend, this or this? If you spend this lesser amount, you could take that extra money and go to a movie. You can show some alternatives as to how they can use that money for different things like that. Now, the next thing was trad wife, boss babe, whatever wife. What about couple time? Well, I feel like, date night's very important. Couple time is very important, and it doesn't matter what kind of wife, partner, working, non-working you are, it's still important that you get out, you get away, and you spend time together. I don't think I need to say more about that. I think anybody who really values their marriage, their partnership, knows the value in that. Okay, next question that came up specifically pilot based is what about moving bases? What about when the pilot wants to upgrade to another airplane type and it requires moving, or a domicile is closed, which requires moving, all of that? What happens to the other working partner um, when this happens? How are they disrupted? Again, this is going to come down to those values, that premarital counseling, or you can even do it once you're married. It's never too late to sit down and talk about potential issues and how you feel like you would handle them and have those conversations so that you're prepared with a plan before any of that ever happens. So that's it more than anything. Know your values, have good communication skills, and use those communication skills to talk about when those type things come up, because they will come up in the airline industry. That's really just the way that it is. And so if you can have those conversations ahead of time, that's going to set you up much more for success. All right, next one, money. Uh, we talked about sharing money. We talked about splitting money last week. We talked, separate accounts and all of that. And again, I shared from my own perspective, we never had separate accounts. We still don't have separate accounts. We shared our money. It's worked great. But again, we had those values identified. We were on the same page financially with what our goals were, what our spending habits were, what we placed value on in terms of spending money, and all of those different kind of things. So it's important to know that. And the reality of it is, in the airline industry, it's very cyclical, and money's going to be cyclical too. There's contract negotiations, there's furloughs, there's downtimes with the economy. So the better that you can plan for the month to month, day to day living expenses, and then put some away, certainly for that rainy day, the better off you'll be. And that helps you with debt management too. It's kind of funny. Lately there's been a rage going on the socials between boomers and Gen X and millennials and Gen Z, talking about how we screwed it up for the younger generation and we're selfish, and we're busy with our two homes and our motor homes and all of our vacations, etc. And we need to just kind of step aside and allow this younger generation to have more. And it's kind of funny. I've watched it interestingly, and I actually have spent a lot of time researching, because you only live with what you know, right? You're raised in the way that you're raised. And I'm going to say this to everybody: all of us are a result of the environment that we were raised in. And in a way, it's not our fault. It can be our responsibility, though, and it is our responsibility. So I have millennial children, and I want them to do well. So instead of yelling at all of them about how lazy they are, because I would say my children aren't lazy, I want to look around and say, what happened? What changed? How can I educate myself? And how can I be a positive influence, a positive resource for this generation? And, I'd like mutual respect. Don't hate on me. I didn't screw everything up. And I won't hate on you and accuse everyone of being lazy or any of the rest of it. So we hear all that. But the bottom line is there are some things that have changed. And it depends on how far you want to go back. When I started really going back and looking at 2008 and the whole housing crisis and a lot of things that have gone on, it's not just one thing that caused housing to be so expensive. If you look at the different political platforms, this side accuses this of doing this and this side accuses that. And the reality of it is all of us are slightly responsible. All of us bear some responsibility in what's gone on. It's not just one administration, it's not just one side. There's a lot of things that got missed along the way and were allowed to happen. That's a whole nother topic. But I also know that today's generation, with the advent of this and an app for everything, it's amazing to me when I stop and look at the amount of expenses that are incurred with the buy now, pay later apps and finance this. And you want to order pizza? Do you want to pay for it all today or do you want to, divide it up over four payments? All the service charge fees with DoorDash and Uber Eats and Instacart and on and on and on. This is creating huge debt for this generation. And they don't really realize it because, when you're clicking on this or adding to a credit card or paying with Apple Pay or so many things, it's almost like free money. It's not the same as getting a paycheck. Let's say you get $500, taking that cash and then having to use that cash to pay all your bills. It's totally different when you start seeing that money deplete and go away and realize, oh, I only have 20 bucks left and 7 days till payday or whatever. When you're doing it all this way, it's like free money. It's like monopoly money. So I really want to encourage everyone to get very fiscally responsible, if you will, about where your money's going. When I say get fiscally responsible, I'm not telling you to do or not do anything. I'm just saying spend some time tracking, spend about 90 days truly tracking your expenses and figure out where money is going and break it down to each one, like how much of it were service fees and tips and convenience fees and all that type stuff. I think you'll be shocked, honestly, because I look at that and I think, well, I'm not going to say that this generation is lazy, but I'm also going to say there were a lot of things we didn't have access to. We didn't have smartphones. We didn't have, I mean, I'm trying to think, you could order takeout, but you had to go and pick it up. I remember, pizza delivery became a thing, but I think really, I can't remember much. Pizza seemed to be the very first one. I think it was Domino's, honestly, that got it figured out to do delivery service. I could be wrong, but we just didn't have those conveniences. If you didn't cook it at home, you either went to a restaurant and sat down, you went through fast food, through the drive-through, or you ordered takeout, which was even rarer back then I mean, today you can order from any restaurant, you can do takeout, but that wasn't always the case. Anyway, so there's so many things that we didn't have access to. So consequently, I feel like in a lot of ways our money went further just because we didn't have access to that. So again, if you will track your expenses for about 90 days, that's going to tell you a lot. And I mean, really track them, like look in depth. When you go out to eat, how much are you actually spending? I mentioned that with the family meals. Teach your kids, this is how much four hamburgers, a salad, and a dessert cost at home. This is what it costs at McDonald's. This is what it costs through DoorDash. And this is what it costs maybe at a higher end restaurant besides McDonald's, whatever. But that will begin to educate you and consequently educate your kids about what's out there. Now, my friend and mastermind partner, Lee Woodward, she is Gen X. She has two Gen Z children, and she has the same philosophy as me. It's like, let's don't hate on and shame this generation. Let's figure out it's our responsibility. I mentioned it's not always our fault, but it is our responsibility. Let's figure out ways to help this generation. She has a website called simplifyadulting.com, simplifyadulting.com. I will have it in the show notes. But one of the things that she's doing is really helping this younger generation adult, right? And in a lot of ways, it can be great for all of us. But to educate and empower them, she's developed some very simple tools. So if you go to simplifyadulting.com, you enter the code PilotWife, you're going to get a free guide, no charge for any of this. You're going to get a free guide on a lot of different tools that you can use and a lot of different strategies, not just to manage money, but to just do a lot of different things that have to do with adulting. I know it sounds crazy, but I remember for the longest time, my daughter could not tell time on a normal clock. She was used to a digital clock or a digital watch. This was before smartphones and all the rest of it. And, I mean, if you're not taught how to read a clock kind of thing, it can be very confusing at times. So it's kind of interesting. people don't know what they don't know. And just recently, she had a guy comment on a video that she had done on how to use stamps, like how to truly mail a letter or a bill and how to use stamps. And he was so cute because he put a comment on her video and said, "Thank you. I had no idea how to use a stamp." Most kids today have never balanced a checkbook. They don't write checks. They don't do any of that. It is not their fault. The reality of it is with technology and the tools and the different things that they've grown up with, it's a very different time. So we can't be mad at them for that unless, I guess the only way you could be mad is if you actually were the one that sat down to teach them this and they just ignored it and, then they don't know how to do it. But you only know what you know, just like all the rest of us. So go to simplifyadulting.com, enter Pilot Wife in there, and you will get her free guide. And my hope is that it truly helps you or it helps your next generation kids, whatever it is, depending on your age and stage listening to the show. Now, one of the other things that I've heard that happens over time is that causes a rift in a marriage or the trad wife, boss babe, whatever it is he's changed. Well, everything was great, but then he changed. And here's what I always say to that. I hope he did. And I hope you've changed too. All of us change. That's part of growing. We grow up, we expand our vision, we expand our knowledge base, we do different things. And so that's an important part of it. And so if you're going to say that, write down what changed and write down what about you changed too. And then again, have that good communication, have those conversations to deal with that. And then, kind of to wrap things up, I wanted to talk a little bit about celebrity and political trad versus modern wife. The reality of it is divorce happens, infidelity happens. We never know why, especially in these celebrity type marriages. We can read the headlines, we can read social media, we can read people's comments, but at the end of the day, nobody really knows because nobody shares all of the details. I looked way back politically with FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his wife Eleanor. Well, they were more of a business partnership, honestly. He had a mistress for years. She knew about it. JFK and Jacqueline Kennedy, right? Today with social media, he would have probably never been the beloved president that most people know him of today. Martin Luther King Jr., same thing. Like he was known as a ladies' man, for lack of a better word. But we didn't have social media. We didn't have all of that. I'm not sharing any of this to form an opinion about these people. I'm just saying there are things that have gone on in the past. There are things that go on with celebrity partnerships and all of that, just like there are in real life. Beyonce and Jay-Z, J-Lo, for goodness sakes, Jennifer Lopez, and her long-suffering romances. And then interestingly, I thought a lot about Bill and Hillary Clinton and the Monica Lewinsky scandal. And it was funny because I remember, I'm dating myself, but I remember back when he was originally running for president and she kind of was accusing Barbara Bush of being a stand by your man kind of gal. And invoking that song from the 60s or 70s, Stand by Your Man, and that kind of thing. And then it was interesting because you always have to be careful what you're sharing because you never know where you're going to end up. And I looked back, I remember thinking later, all the times Hillary had to turn her head and look the other way because I don't think whether you love Bill Clinton or you hate him, it doesn't matter. What he's done is what he's done. And he ultimately got caught, so to speak, with Monica Lewinsky and, had to really shuffle on that one. But I look back and I think, it's the same kind of thing. Most people would identify Hillary Clinton as a more of a modern wife with her own career and her own aspirations and all of that. But at the end of the day, she stuck with and accepted a marriage that was less than in terms of what a lot of people might be looking for with trad wife versus all the rest of it. So I just thought I'd share that. Bottom line, what do you want? What are your values? Who do you allow to define and who do you allow to demean you? Never let that person be social media. Never let it be the headlines. Never let it be clickbait or well-intentioned friends and family who really don't know what your core values are necessarily unless you've shared them, what you've come together to agree on and accept and work toward in your partnership. So again, I ask, what does it mean being a wife today? What does it mean to be a wife in today's world? Do we have to name and label it? It's about balance, it's about choice, and it's about rejecting societal guilt. I really am big on that in favor of what makes your soul happy, what makes your partner happy, what makes you happy together, and what makes your family thrive. Because at the end of the day, success is all about the one who lives life on her own terms. So I welcome your discussion. I welcome any comments. Grab the Pilot Wife checklist. And if you're floundering in all of this and you just want to have a simple conversation and set up a time for a free call, just a conversation, go to pilotwifepodcast.com. I'm Jackie Elmer. See you next week as we continue the adventure and the conversation. Hey, pilot wife and fellow aviator, I'm Jackie Elmer. With nearly 4 decades as a pilot wife, I'm here to help you navigate the ups and downs and turbulence that can go along with this lifestyle. To learn more about the resources and coaching I offer, go to pilotwifepodcast.com and make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, Travel Life by a Pilot Wife.